Hi folks, Eric with Baileigh Industrial. We're going to take a moment to discuss rotary drawbender tooling. The three categories that we predominantly work with is our scheduled pipe die sets, our round tubing die sets, and our square tubing die sets. The scheduled pipe die sets and the round tubing die sets have a lot of similarities in them, so we're going to kind of discuss those first, and then we'll get into the square die sets here in a moment. So the few things we want to point out between these two specific die sets is our scheduled pipe dies are always going to be green, and our light gauge round tubing dies are going to be blue. Main difference is that these two materials that work in these dies are different in how they measure. A scheduled pipe die is going to measure ID. The inside of the material is going to measure on an inside radius, and that's what that die is going to be used for. A light gauge round tubing die set is going to measure OD, or outside diameter, so that's what that die is going to be fitted for as well. Another component on both of these dies is that the material size that they are for is engraved on the die. This particular die is for 1¼ inch pipe with a 4-inch centerline radius. This particular tube die here also is an 1¼ inch tube die with a 4-inch centerline radius. Centerline radius is relative to the center of the spindle on the machine, which is what the die actually drops onto. Center of that spindle to the center outside edge of that die being 4 inches. That's going to get you a 4-inch centerline radius of bend, center of material bend. When you do a complete 180-degree bend, which you can do on these dies as well, that's going to correlate to an 8-inch roughly center to center bend. Another important feature to note about the die sets is that the 0 point or tangent is marked on the dies as well. So you can make a mark on your material, line it up with that tangent line, and make a bend. Now, if you're not sure how much the material is going to grow as a result of the bend, a quick way to do that is to take a piece of material and cut it to a specific length, say 2 feet, and then make a mark at the 1 foot mark and place that line on the tangent or 0 point on your die and make a bend. Once you do that, you can put it on a table, put a square on your bend, and determine how much the material grew as a result of the bend and the radius that you're using for that particular bend. And then you can subtract from there to get a specific OD size or specific ID size and do the math backwards. Another important topic on these die sets is the counter die block, which is what this assembly is here. On here there are some replacement parts. There's a plastic slide on here, and there is a bronze insert on here, and these are both components that help do the shaping during the bend. They're completely replaceable. There's some bolts on the back side here to replace the bronze, and some cap screws inside here to replace the plastic slide, but those are things that will wear out over time and very easy to replace, and things that we usually have here in stock as well. And another option that a person can use is what's called a roller assembly. We have two versions here, a steel roller assembly and a nylon roller assembly. These are relatively specific, usually used in stainless or aluminum applications where no marking or scuffing at all can happen on the bend. And these are basically going to roll along the material, still providing the same shaping, but not going to give you any marking or marring. So very helpful as well. And you're not putting any bend lubricant on these as well. You're running these dry. There's no friction associated with this system. The other component on here is the hook arm itself. This is what's holding the material in place and preventing it from slipping at all while the bend is happening. If there's any slippage in the material, the bend will fail, you'll get wrinkling, you'll get breakage possibly, it'll just won't look like you want. So what we're doing here is we're putting our material in and we're locking it in place, and then we can have our counter die block in position and make the bend. So the next die we're going to discuss is our square die sets. These two have the material size engraved on here with the centerline radius of that bend that it's going to produce. And that centerline radius is from the center of the die to the center of the material. In this case, is a 1-inch square tube die, and it's got a 4.5-inch center line. So in that case, if you were to do a full 180-degree bend center of material to center of material, you would end up with a 9-inch center line. You see these handles on here. These are handles for holding this top plate down in place. This plate is movable and adjustable so that you can get your material out and get your material in. When you make a bend on square material, because it's square, it's going to want to push out in all 4 areas. This die cap basically is to help the material stay square and stay in place. Once the material's in place, then you're going to tighten down these handles to just a finger tightness till they stop. Once they stop on the material, that is as far as you're going to go, and then you'll make the bend. If you put a lot of force on these handles and then make your bend, they become very tight once the bend's been made, and they're virtually very difficult to get loose again. So do not tighten them with any amount of force, just go until they stop, and that's going to be more than adequate. The die too has cap screws to hold the die in place. Another component about the square die sets is the hook arm. On here, you're going to put the material in place and use this tightening block to pinch the material in place. It's important to have these tight so that that material does not slide back while making a bend, so you don't have any bend failure issues of any kind. Another component of the square die sets is the counter die block. These are relatively simplistic. It's got a plastic slide on here, which is completely replaceable. Things that we have in stock here. Just take the cap screws out, take out the old one, put the new one on, and you're back in business. This die set does require bend lube to be on the counter die while making a bend, so very important to have. Another part of our tooling that we'd like to discuss is our smaller tube die sets that we offer. When you get to 5/8 inch size material and smaller from there, the dies take on a different look entirely. Material size is still engraved on the die as well as the center line, and the center line is still from the center of the die to the center of the material in the die as to what that's going to produce. The cap screw here is to fasten the die set down to the machine itself, so that stays in place. The roller assembly is standard on dies when they get to this size. 2 rollers here that are on a pivoting head that move with the material, so you would get basically no marking or marring at all, as you can see on this bend here as well. Another unique component of our rotary draw bender tooling is our universal bend plate. This system is predominantly used for solid round material, square solid material, light gauge round tubing, or some flat bar as well. The center cap screw is holding the entire bend plate down in position on the machine. The pin that's around that cap screw is what you're bending around. This is considered your radius of bend. This particular bend pin is 1.25 inch center line. It is engraved on the pin. This pin over here is a 3/4 inch bend pin, and to switch them out, it's relatively simple. Put that pin in place and put that cap screw and tighten that back down to the machine. And now when you put material in here, it will produce a 3/4 inch centerline radius bend. Another feature of the universal bend plate is the indexing arm here, which is basically acting as the hook arm of the die set to enable the material to move. You do not want the material to slide during the bend process. You want to keep it fixed and in position so you get a good legitimate bend radius. And that's what this is doing. You would put your material in through here, and this pinch point is going to basically pinch the material in place so that it cannot move. And all the holes that are on this plate are basically fixing holes to position this accordingly relative to the material that you're working with. So very helpful. One more part about the universal bend plate is the counter die or the roller that's associated with it. This roller is going to go into position on the bend plate, and it's going to push against the material, providing pressure, and there's a roller on here that's going to roll with it. So there's at no point any material being scuffed or marred throughout the bend itself. Everything that is touching it is either rolling or is not going to mark the material. So that's important to have that adjusted at the right depth as well, along with your pivot point. Another helpful component while doing any kind of rotary draw bending is a digital angle finder. This is ours that we offer at Baileigh. This is a magnetic block that's removable from this particular holder. We offer the block and the holder both. You can remove this, put it on any kind of surface, and get a legitimate angle as to where that is at. Very helpful and accurate. Simply put the material in the holder, tighten down the bolt onto the material, and that's going to help you determine bend-to-bend orientation. If you have one bend in place and you need to make another bend 90 degrees or a true 180 degrees in relationship to the other bend that you just made, this is a very helpful tool to help you do that. No more days of holding a level on the material and doing it manually. Very hard to do and not accurate at all. So very helpful tool to use. So we're going to take a piece of tubing here, put it in the holder. We're just going to finger tight our bolt. If you're in the shop, you'd want to put a wrench on that and tighten it really good. And then when we rotate this, you can see our digital angle finder giving us a degree in real time, and it's very, very accurate and touchy. So you can get very specific and repeatable having something like this in your shop. So I hope you found this video educational and helpful. If you have any questions on our tooling or our machines, please feel free to give us a call or check us out at Baileigh.com.